Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I am thrilled you've joined me for the final part of our story tonight, which is part 4, and we're about to learn from Chuck Warrington, who is telling Jaden exactly what happened to his father on that inauspicious day when things went so badly awry, and when he so tragically lost his father, which was the reason why 9 years later he put their property on the market. And it turns out a very good friend from the past wants to buy that property from him, but wants to make sure that it's safe to move into, because he wants to start a family in that property. So we're about to learn what is going on. So let's continue. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with part 4 of our story. Chuck's account. 9 years ago, Jaden. Like you, I was 20 years old back then, still living at home with both of my parents, and, of course, my non-identical twin sister, you know. Of course, you hadn't seen me then, but I had transformed my body. I had become reasonably strong and very fit. I was studying to become an ACSM personal trainer, which means you have the scientific knowledge and know-all to work in a fitness facility. I was also studying to become a nutrition coach to help people with their diets. One day my father enlisted me to help him cut back a few trees in the woodgrove. We liked to keep the pathways for riding clear, for easy access to the public riding trail, which was like a sprawling labyrinth of widespread trails that led across some spectacular parts of wilderness. My father, as you can imagine, was a keen horse rider, hence the stable blocks on our property that I'm sure you've seen. So keeping the trails clear for riding was very important for him. So he enlisted my help with the project. When Mr. Prt4of4 showed you around our property the other day, you probably became acutely aware of how spectacular some of those ancient trees are. Tall, lofty, gargantuan in size, quite magnificent they are. As you can imagine, they attract a lot of exotic bird life, along with other indigenous species onto the property. It's common for us to have deer coming there, especially when the apple trees in the orchard are bursting with fruit. We've had all kinds of visitors over the years, including a family of cougars, where the mother brought several litters of her cubs to kittenishly prance around our property. She was showing them off to us. Of that we were in no doubt. I mean, you go into the grove, and the bird song is absolutely extraordinary. There is nothing quite like it. It's soothing and tranquilizing, to say the very least. I remember me and my father went through the woodgrove, deciding what needed to be cut away, what needed pruning, what needed pulling out. Stuff like that. We found an area in our woods that was very strange. We had never seen it before. It veered off the beaten path. But me and my father realized that if we cut away some of those trees in that part of the grove, we could create another trail that led to another footpath, a public one at that. In this outlandish part of the woodgrove, me and my father discovered a couple of dead trees had been deliberately planted upside down, with their roots dangling in the air. It got our immediate, undivided attention. I think my father's words were, "What the hell? What is going on here? Let's not kid. We'd never seen anything like this before a day in our lives." It was like this treacherous part of the woods was projecting a hostile, perfidious, menacious intent towards us, as if warning us to keep away. I could feel danger signs flashing in my head like bright red lights, almost as if a little voice inside me was whispering, "Keep out, if you know what's good for you." I promise you it felt incredibly off, almost as if we were intruding in an iniquitous space where we were not remotely welcome. Everything was eerily still, hauntingly quiet. You felt as if you could hear a pin drop, and if you heard a crackle of a dry leaf or something like that, you practically jumped out of your skin, as the sound would scream in the deadly silence. I felt disquieting chills trickling down the back of my spine, as if something entrenched deep inside my gut was remonstrating an internal warning within me to keep well away from this place. And if that was not bad enough, there were peculiar, gruesome features swinging from the old oak tree, dangling precariously from the branches, tied together with leather thongs. These insidious decorations, whatever you choose to call them, were hideously ugly, vulgar, vile, creepy. They were like dolls made from grass and sticks that were sinister to look at, rather reminding me of the Blair Witch Project, which I remember seeing on television a while ago. We examined the tree decorated with these strange, abnormal symbols that I knew meant something. My father said again, "What the hell is going on here? It's like something or someone is warning us to keep away." Why does this place feel so dark? We also found areas where clusters of stones were gathered together. Sticks were sticking through them at odd, peculiar angles. But every stone and every stick seemed to convey some kind of code that we could not read or interpret or comprehend. But I knew the energy in this place was malevolent, as if it resonated with the lowest vibration of the darkest entities you can imagine. I knew there was meaning behind all this madness, and I told my father that we should ignore this part of the woodgrove. Something or someone doesn't want us here. I don't feel good about opening out this path. Besides, we don't need to do it, do we? Not really. The paths around here are big enough. We've got many of them through the grove for the horses. So we don't need to do this as far as I'm concerned. My father said to me, "I'm sorry, son. I don't agree with you. I wouldn't read too much into all these ugly signs. It's probably kids having a laugh. My bet it's the Knackerstop kids. They're behind this. I'm sure they are. I understand from their mother Gloria they're always up to mischief, and I've caught them myself a couple of times on our property. So you mark my words, they did this, son." I shrugged my shoulders and said, "But why would they do this, Dad? For what reason would they do it?" "Kids having fun, of course," said my father. "When I was a child, I loved scaring the bejesus out of my mother." "I'm sorry, Dad," I said. "I don't think the Knackerstop kids did this. I mean, would they be even strong enough to plant a tree in the ground upside down? With the greatest of respect, I don't think they could do it, Dad. I think something is warning for us not to come near this place. Honestly, son, listen to yourself. This is our woodgrove, and I think opening up an extra path by cutting back some of these large trees is an excellent idea. We can start tomorrow with the project. I'm not happy about this, Dad, at all. The main trail through the trees for the horses is good enough, surely. Why do we need another? Why not another? The more the merrier, my father said to me. It'll make the rides more diverse, don't you think? More interesting. I, for one, am not going to be intimidated by a few ominous symbols scattered around the grove. Very well. Have it your way, I said. I will help you. But just so you know, I'm not happy about this at all. The next morning me and my father began cutting away a couple of trees in that ominous part of the wood grove. I was filled with a sense of impending dread. It was like a deep voice inside my head was urging me not to do this, to stop at once. I do remember at one point I felt as if we were being watched, as if eyes were drilling into the back of my neck. I expressed my extreme misgivings to my father, but he laughed dismissively at me and literally overlooked my worries, assuring me that I was the one that was being ridiculous, that I was overreacting, that I was being dramatic. I know he did not feel that we were being watched like I did. All of a sudden, we heard the most horrifying scream. It was the most petrifying, ear-piercing sound that I have ever heard. It was like someone was being murdered. The sound sent chills coursing down my spine. My heart thundered and boomed violently in my chest. I began to shake like a leaf. I knew at once we were in perilous danger. We were messing with something we did not understand. My father immediately cocked his head, raised a brow and said, "What the hell was that?" I began trembling again. I couldn't stop shaking. I looked at my father through frightened eyes that were round and wide and as large as dinner plates, and I pleaded with him obsequiously, Dad, let's get out of here now. Let's get out of here now. Something is watching us. We need to get out of here." My father remained resolutely stubborn, insouciantly indifferent. I think, of course, he was startled by the strange screams, but he wasn't easily put off, and told me once again that I was overreacting. "It's probably one of those squawking birds you get," he told me. "Believe me, they can scream really badly." "Not like this, Dad," I said. "Nothing screams like this," I told him sharply. "I'm sorry, Dad. You're deluding yourself. There was no way that was a bird." With all my heart, soul, and might, I wanted to run out of the wood grove as fast as my legs could carry me. Get the hell out of there. But I couldn't leave my father alone. He would be vulnerable without me there. I was glad we had come into the grove with our rifles for protection, although in a strange way they seemed almost pathetic compared to that sound. Then we heard the discombobulating screams all over again. Something came charging towards us, like a herd of rampaging bison. The forest began to shake and vibrate and rattle. My father hurriedly grabbed his rifle. He began indiscriminately firing off shots through the trees. He didn't know where to aim his rifle. We couldn't see a single thing through the tangle of foliage, shrubbery, and thorny briars. It was in that impossible moment I knew my father realized with a haunting clarity that we were in perilous danger, and the look on his face became fearful. It was like a dark shadow crossed over him. And that was when we saw the humongous dark figure sashaying through the trees towards us, and its fury was tangible. In seconds I realized we were seeing a Bigfoot. He was like a cantankerous old man. He was breathing heavily, gasping and spluttering, and I could tell he was old. But my God, he was powerful. An awesome-looking creature, like nothing I've ever seen before, and my father shot straight at him. But the Bigfoot merely bounced out of the way and grabbed my father's rifle from his trembling hands, breaking it into pieces, throwing it across the forest floor in abject disgust. And its parts just disappeared into the undergrowth, and was swallowed up. I was so terrified. I stared in horror at this creature. I felt like an ant underneath an elephant's powerful foot, and that in seconds I would be pulverized by this thing and turned into powder. It was much larger than the Bigfoot I'd seen as a young boy, easily over 9 foot tall, covered in black flowing dark hair that was growing grey in areas around his face. The fact that my father shot at the Bigfoot enraged the creature to no end. He whipped my father up into his powerful arms and threw him against the tree so hard in retribution, and it happened so quickly. I doubt my father felt a thing. It was like being shot, I suspect. The way my father's head was slammed was so fearsome, so ferocious. It resulted in his face almost sliding off his head, like melted candle wax, and his head hung off his neck at a strange angle. I wanted to scream with all my might, but I could not. Nothing came out of my dry, parched throat that was throbbing in my chest. I had become like one of those fossilized trees with a petrified wood. I did not scream. I just stood there, waiting my turn, waiting to meet my end, waiting for this huge, powerful Bigfoot to hurt me like he'd hurt my father. But he did not. He turned around to look directly at me, and he appeared to be genuinely sad and reflective. He was disappointed that he'd killed my father, incredibly remorseful, and I could feel his subsiding anger was replaced by a very deep regret. I almost felt sorry for the creature. It was like he was saying, "What have I done? I didn't mean for this to happen." I found my eyes meeting his, sinking into their depths, and I knew he wasn't evil. His eyes were kind. I heard the audible English words flooding into my head saying, "Look what he made me do. I was so angry. I forgot my own strength. Your father was messing around with something he does not understand. I put the warning signs up. I spoke to him in his head, but he refused to let my voice in. He barricaded it. I'm sorry I've done this to your father, but I warn you, don't mess with what you do not understand, for your kind do not see what my eyes can see, for the light spectrum in your human eyes is greatly compromised. Your infrared frequency is crippled. It cannot see what my kind can see. You need to keep away." And with that he turned around and glided into the grove, and for a moment I stood there, like an ice statue at a banquet, not moving or daring to flinch. It was as if I was caught up in an outlandish, bizarre dream, from which I would surely waken. I wanted to wake up so badly. I wanted to wake up to know that this hadn't happened. But I knew that it had. Moments later, a dark shape emerged through the trees, and I recognized it to be the Bigfoot female that I'd seen once as a boy. She had a baby Bigfoot on her shoulders that was terribly cute. She looked so sad, so melancholic. She shook her head very, very regretfully, and I heard the kind words in my head. "I'm sorry my father did this. He didn't mean to hurt your old man. He was belligerently angry that you were messing around with the dark energy." I looked up at her, with tears spilling down my cheeks, and she whispered in my head again, "I'm sorry," and then she was gone. It was only after I saw my father's dead corpse hanging limply from the tree, with his face completely wiped off, that I ran home screaming at the top of my lungs. I told my mother exactly what had happened. She shook her head in annoyance. "What has your father done? Why did he not listen to me?" She claimed she had experienced a dream the night before, where she was told not to touch that part of the wood grove. She told my father about her prognostication and the warning voice that had spoken to her in her head. My father had willfully lied to my mother. He had told her he would not remove the trees from that area of the grove. She had taken him at his word, unfortunately telling my contrary, rather willful father not to do something always had the reverse effect on him, rather like a kid being told not to touch the chocolate in the larder, and then that kid stops at nothing to acquire it. I think my mother was cursing herself for not keeping a beady eye on my father, because she knew exactly what he was like. She kept saying, "I knew the man wouldn't listen. There is no fool like an old fool." She wasn't angry with the Bigfoot as you might expect, because she felt the creature did not know its own strength. But she could not continue living at our house after such a devastating tragedy, as it would only serve to remind her of her dreadful loss. Of course, we never did tell anybody else the truth about what had happened. Naturally, we told the people that rented our property from us that there may well be a capricious Bigfoot on the premises, who might have been responsible for my father's passing. We told them that with a great deal of apprehension, but we felt we needed to warn them. We chose, of course, not to tell them the absolute truth. That may have been too much to divulge, and would unlikely have been believed. Beyond our warning, we told them that if they left a certain part of the woodgrove alone, they should be all right, as we believed the Bigfoot did not want anyone messing around in that particular space. We escorted them to the part of the grove that they needed to avoid like the plague. Once again it was covered with all those ominous warning signs. I will admit it creeped the tenants out, although I don't think they believed for a moment that there really was a Bigfoot on the premises. One day the tenant, Mr. Mosley, phoned me up. It was probably about 3 years back, I think. I was not surprised to hear from him. He was always regularly keeping me updated about the condition of the house. If something needed fixing, he'd be in touch, as that's the problem when you rent out a house to someone, and it's another reason I chose to sell in the end. As if anything goes wrong while you have a tenant staying on your premises, more than likely you're expected to fix it. 3 weeks prior, Mr. Mosley had contacted me about a burst pipe, so I'd sent a plumber to the premises to sort the problem out for him. No questions asked, of course. I asked him if everything was all right, and much like you've done today, he asked me if he could meet up with me in Spokane for a quiet little chat. And as bizarre as it is, we were sitting at this very table I'm sitting with you now, drinking the very same craft beers. I remember thinking something bad had happened. What was he wanting with me? I was nervous about our rendezvous, as I hate mystery of any kind. In the beginning, as we were drinking beers together, he said to me, "I've got something to tell you, Chuck. Remember I was dismissive about your claims that there might be an angry Bigfoot on the premises? Because I never believed in the cryptic creature. I want to apologize for this fact." "There is no need for that," I said. "It's not my problem if you didn't believe me, and I'm not offended by it at all." It turned out Mr. Mosley wanted to share his experience with someone. I guess he knew I would believe him. Ostensibly he was afraid to talk to anyone about it for fear of being ridiculed, which was understandable, of course. Mr. Mosley is a CEO of a very influential company. The last thing he wanted was his credibility undermined, but he really needed to talk to someone about his experience. I guess he knew I would believe his account. He told me he'd never tell his wife or kids about what he'd seen. He was terribly afraid they would lose respect for him. At the time of his idiosyncratic, unorthodox encounter, that he never saw coming for a moment, he was nonchalantly walking in the woodgrove, clearing away some of the overgrown trees along the trail, as one of the branches had nearly thrown him off his horse, when it snagged into his shirt that he was wearing. He realized that they were constantly being scraped and scratched by overhanging branches on the trail that needed a trim and to be cut away, although he could have contacted me to sort the problem out, but he chose to do it himself. As he was doing all this with a measure of satisfactory success, he remembered our conversation from years back, and the strange symbols he'd seen on the trees, and I guess curiosity got the better of him. He privately wondered if the strange insidious signs would still be up all these years later. He thought he'd go and check it out for himself. I dare say he'd not been there for about 7 years or so. He told me that as he ventured to that part of the grove, it was like entering one rarely happy room filled with birdsong, and going into another sombre room, devoid of light and pretty birdsong. He told me this part of the woodgrove was bleak, as if a deep malevolent depression hung over it like a gloomy thundercloud. I had chills, he told me, real chills, and I knew in that moment I should not be there, especially when I saw a couple of upside-down trees, with their roots hanging in the air. It was bodeful, to say the very least. As I was standing there looking at all this stuff, I pulled off one of those strange decorations from the tree, and then I was hit with an overwhelming sense that something was watching me. I heard someone clearing their throat loudly. For a moment I was certain it was my wife. She was always clearing her throat due to her lactose intolerance. "Sadie? Sadie, is that you?" I called out to her. I looked around my immediate surroundings to see if I could detect any abstract movements, but nothing was there. I'm afraid the foliage in this part of the grove was dense and thick, with curtains of shrubbery, tangles of burgeoning creeper that crawled over trees indiscriminately. So yes, it was difficult to see anything. I nearly fainted when I caught a glimmer of what looked like a massive black shadow, hiding behind a curtain of shrubbery, watching me through twinkling dark eyes. At first, my impression was it must be a bear. I stood still, my eyes focusing stiffly on the area. At this point, my heart was literally doing gymnastics in my chest, swinging violently backwards and forwards like a pendulum. And I was literally making fists with my hands, as my nerves were heightened. I'm not sure why I did not run away, but I did not understand why my adrenal response appeared to fail me. I knew something was there was no doubt about that, and that I was potentially in grave danger. That was when I observed a huge, thick hand pushing back the curtain of foliage, like you might pull away a shower curtain when you exit the shower cubicle. And that was when I saw her. I nearly passed out from shock. Hand on heart, I was standing feet away from a female Bigfoot. I knew she wanted me to see her. There was nothing evasive about her. Indeed, she demanded my attention. I noticed her dark chocolate-coloured eyes were focused on the ominous grass decoration I was holding in my hand. She reached out to grab it, taking it from me, and promptly replacing it on the tree branch, as if hanging a Christmas decoration on a fir tree. It was all so surreal. I thought I was caught up in a dream. The thing was huge, but I was not fearful of her. Her energy was benevolent and gentle. What she did next amazed me. She spoke to me in an indigenous language that I did not understand, but for some reason, every word bounced into my head with an English translation. And I thought, what the hell? How does that happen so seamlessly? Even Google Apps can't translate like this. Kilati kakwina, holota kila, bogolana. If you know what's good for you, you won't come here. I need to warn you to stay away from this place. It's really bad in this part. The energy is dark. Kolati kanakwa, hotolatila, nisakwani. I would advise you to touch nothing here. If you do as I say, no harm will befall you. And with that she glided away. When Chuck told me the extraordinary story about his tenant's interaction with a female Bigfoot, I was naturally amazed. What do you think is going on in that part of the grove? I asked him. I have no idea, but it's best to stay away. And if you do, bro, there's no reason why you should not buy the property from me. The female Bigfoot seems to make herself known, to warn people not to mess with what they don't understand. So something about the land in that part is clearly off. And it seems these Bigfoots have outer-worldly powers. They know stuff beyond our grasp. I think they can see through the veil into other worlds and dimensions. It's the only thing that makes sense to me. It was good to see Chuck Warrington again, and I realized that when we were young we may not have had much in common, but things were profoundly different now. So I decided to buy the house that he'd lived in as a boy, but to also change my diet and enroll with some personal training sessions with Chuck in order to rekindle our friendship, which I'm so glad I did, because these days we're the very best of friends. Of course, when I told my wife what Chuck had revealed to me about what really happened to his father, she was confounded. It's such a sad story, she said. Me and my wife did not hesitate to contact the realtor, Mr. Prt4of4, to put in an offer in for the place, which Chuck had promised us he would accept. So against all the odds, things were just clearly meant to be. When we moved into the house, me and my wife settled into the place like a duck to water, and we knew the property would likely stay within our family for generations to come. I could not imagine selling such a spectacular property. Soon we had stable blocks on our property, occupied by 3 American quarter horses, and we purchased 2 lovable golden retrievers, Mercy and Starbright, who were devoted to my wife, possibly because she lavished so much attention on the pair and spoilt them rotten. For the first year we spent most of our time fixing the Warrington place to our liking, hanging up curtains as you do, and so I didn't give much attention to the woodgrove, apart from using the horse trails to enjoy the odd ride here and there. One day after riding Red Rum, I realized that my watch that I'd been wearing for years was no longer on my wrist. It had fallen off during the ride. My wife had warned me to remove my watch from my wrist, as the leather strap needed replacing. I was now cursing under my breath, because it was an expensive watch, but also because it had been given to me by my deceased father, which made it all the more precious. He had given me the watch after I graduated from college, and I never took it off, as it made me feel close to him, and now it was lost, and I felt heartbroken. To say that I was upset about misplacing my watch is an understatement. I saw it as a connection to my dad, and with it gone, I felt almost as if I'd lost a part of him. It was one of the first times in my life I was almost close to tears. I was mad at myself for not getting the threadbare strap fixed. I knew the watch could potentially be anywhere on the premises, and to find it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Of course, it goes without saying, my wife gave me a right telling off. I can't believe you! Did I not warn you that the strap was weak and was likely to break in any moment? I don't fancy your chances of finding it anywhere. The woodgrove is full of fallen leaves and overgrown shrubs, so how the hell are you going to find it? Don't you think I'm upset? I said curtly. Of course you're right. You're always right. I should have replaced the strap, but I didn't, and it's too late to cry over it." My wife looked at me sympathetically. She shook her head and said, "You wouldn't be in this mess, would you, if you actually listened to my sagacious advice and had replaced the strap?" Moments later, Chuck gave me a call. I told him that I'd misplaced my precious watch, and he had a great idea. "Listen, one of my clients is very keen on hunting for lost coins and stuff like that. His hobby is using metal detectors. He's managed to collect some rare coins over the years. I can borrow it from him if you like and drop it off at your place for a couple of days' use. I'm sure he won't mind. He's a generous man. It'll increase your chances of finding your lost treasure, and I can help you look for it if you like. Don't give up hope, bro. I'm sure you will find it." "You really think a metal detector will help?" I asked him. "Why not? I mean, if you can recover ancient coins that have been buried for centuries, it must be much easier to find something above ground, surely," he said to me. When Chuck arrived at my house with a metal detector, I did not fancy our chances in finding my watch, but I was willing to give anything a go. Together we retraced my journey down the horse-riding trail, waving around the metal detector, which sometimes would go off, but alas, we just found old nails and a few coins that were regretfully not very ancient. I remember feeling this was a pointless endeavour. We were never, ever going to find my father's watch, as the sprawling trail was so large and wide, and there was so much ground to cover. How could we find anything that was missing? "Don't look so sorrowful," said Chuck, who was always more upbeat than I was. "I'm sure we'll find it. Try and think about when you were last wearing it. Try and visualize it in your head." "That's it, Chuck. I simply can't remember when I was wearing it last on the trail." As I began to visualize my father's watch in my head, I continued to search the ground with the metal detector, and then I got the feeling that I was being watched, as if eyes were boring into mine. And then there she was, the female Bigfoot that Chuck had seen as a boy. But now I was seeing her myself, and in her hands, with her sausage-sized fingers, she held out my watch to me and said, "Kilani kwa, motalinu, kisala toi. I think you're looking for this." And with that she nodded her head and glided away, before I could even say thank you to her. Chuck slapped me excitedly on the back and said, "That's the Bigfoot that I saw when I was a boy, and now you've seen her too. This is cool." I hasten to say it's been 5 years since that encounter, but I'm hoping that the Bigfoot will cross my path one day soon again. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, wasn't that the most incredible story? I loved every minute of it. And how fabulous that, Jaden and Chuck renewed their friendship again, and Jaden now lives in a house where that extraordinary Bigfoot encounter happened. Until next time, goodbye and good night.